while fighting crime at night, Batman gets the impulse to have the wedding tonight. They each agree to bring one witness, and it's not hard for Batman to round up a judge. Catwoman decides for her witness, she'll break out her best friend Holly Robinson from Arkham. When she does, Holly is happy for Selina, but genuinely surprised Batman is capable of this. She always thought it was him being miserable that made him Batman in the first place. Thinking on this, Selina decides to run, leaving a heartbroken Bruce only a half-finished note. Catwoman flees, while Bruce leaps off a rooftop into the night. The wedding was supposed to happen on a rooftop, because that's where the two always existed. Holly Robinson returns to Arkham, where she reports it was a success. The Batman is resolutely and truly broken. Hello, and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is my recap and review of Batman number 50. So I've been holding off on this one, but we've been spoiled on the results of this issue for some time. The New York Times over the weekend published a review of this comic where they, for whatever reason, spoiled the main thesis of this comic. That after all the hype and build-up of this wedding, it wasn't actually going to happen. I and many other DC fans were hoping that something about this was wrong, or that maybe once we read the comic, things would change, but by and large, this news was not received well, and for good reason. It's not just the fact that this is a pretty disappointing move story-wise, we'll get into that in a second. This was an unmitigated disaster from a publishing standpoint. Not only did this backlash cause a lot of people to cancel their orders and hype over the issue coming out today, mainly it meant that legions of fans were suddenly canceling and not interested in reading or buying this issue. Meaning local comic book stores, which were told by DC this would be a big event that lots of readers would be interested in, high and dry for however many comics they ordered, which was likely going to be way more than what the actual demand is going to be for this issue. A lot of these local comic book stores also spent good money on pre-planned events and marketing things, midnight openings and premieres of this issue, all sorts of things that is going to end up costing them a lot of money depending on how well this comic sells and how much people are actually interested in it. My guess is it's going to be okay. There's going to be enough sales that it's not going to be absolutely terrible of this comic, but I think it's also going to underperform and going to lead to a lot of people leaving this series. And I think it's kind of deserved. Here's where I stand on the issue personally. I don't think DC is obligated to feature the story exactly as they advertise it. So for example, I could see them advertising this wedding and as a twist, someone dies or something doesn't work out and they don't end up getting married, which is pretty much what happened here. But that aspect of it is okay. And the reason for that is we don't want to box writers in, that, and especially the marketing teams over at DC and Marvel, to such an extent that they can't hide certain plot details and surprises along the way. Let's say Marvel had some sort of Red Wedding style event from Game of Thrones. If they just wanted to advertise it as a wedding and it turned out to be a bloodbath, that should be okay because we want the surprise to be there. Oh, I guess I just spoiled something there. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. But you get the point. We need to have surprises in our stories, even if we shouldn't rely on the surprises to tell our stories. But there is a way to market that and to do this thing without screwing over local comic book stores and your market. It's a very disappointing read. Tom King is the one who sold me on the idea of Batman and Catwoman being a couple. I was very skeptical, mostly because of the inconsistencies with how they write Selina. But Tom King did a good job at selling me into why Batman needs her and how fun it would be to have a married Bruce Wayne as the central focus of our comics. That's very different from the 75 plus years of Batman and Catwoman history. So I was excited, really excited to see a world where Batman was married. A world where both Batman and Superman were married. That's different and interesting. But we're not doing that. Tom King has since said on Twitter that he has a 100-issue plan for this series, and it's going to be focusing on the story between Batman and Catwoman. So maybe marriage is in the cards, or maybe it isn't, but they're just going to end up long-term committed to one another. I could see these two characters not really caring about marriage as a concept, so it's not like them being husband and wife is mandatory. And it sure feels like this line has been crossed that can never be crossed again. How much are you going to believe DC if they advertise another wedding with Batman in the future, now that this one hasn't worked out? It feels so dishonest that they can't pull this stunt again. And like I said, it's okay to have hyped up this wedding to a degree, even if the wedding wasn't really happening. But what they didn't need to do was market the dress, involve a million variant covers to this thing, have issues upon issues of build-up and months of marketing outside of the comics themselves. Think pieces and all these other weird articles written for this event. A Spotify playlist was created. DC really didn't convey that this wedding wasn't going to be happening, that they were leading towards a fake-out. There were little hints here and there, but by and large, they badly misled their audience. Which is a shame because the issue itself isn't that bad. The artwork is phenomenal. So many wonderful people are involved in this. A lot of longtime artists doing their very first Batman work do so in this issue. And the way this comic's written is kind of brilliant in how it involves these artists, often using their covers in story as we go through the narration and history of Batman and Catwoman. It's a wonderful celebration of these two characters, and a wonderful, amazing display of artwork, color, and even excellent lettering. They all do a really remarkable job, and on the whole, this is a real treat in terms of art. But the story does feel disappointing, and while it is heartbreaking to see Batman being left at the altar, so to speak, and that is well done and well handled, especially the way Alfred kind of comforts Batman, I am getting really tired of miserable Batman stories. The central thesis of Tom King's Batman is the question as to whether or not Batman can be happy. And while I've enjoyed this exploration and this move towards making Batman a happier character, I've always thought this was a kind of dumb question to ask. Because the answer is, and always has been, of course. Alfred says it so himself in this issue. If Bruce isn't happy, then why does he keep doing all the crazy things he's doing? If after all the things he's been through, he still keeps going and keeps doing what he does, he pretty much has to be happy. And to be honest, if Batman can't experience any joy, then he's not a character worth following at all. Yes, Batman has endured a lot of tragedy, far beyond what most of us can even imagine. But even then, he should have moments of happiness. I have known a lot of people who have endured some pretty harsh trauma. It doesn't mean they're not allowed to have any joy in their life, you know? And as for the whole wedding thing, I and you and everyone out there know there's a lot of people out there who serve our countries, who work in the world of law enforcement, or do other very dangerous jobs. Electricians have a more dangerous job than police. And a lot of these people who risk their lives to make our lives better have husbands and wives. You know? And they have families. So the idea that Batman has to be miserable to be Batman or has to be single to be Batman is ludicrous. It always has been, and it always will be. For them to walk away from this stuff, or for them to put it off just for 50 more issues, that's insane. And let's talk about the craziness of Tom King's plan. Most comics are lucky to run for 50 issues. We are 2 issues short of the entire span of Batman's run during the New 52 era, which lasted 4 or 5 years. And yet, we are 50 issues in deep, and Tom King is asking us to wait 50 more issues for us to see the full picture of his story. Even on the bi-weekly schedule, we will have to wait 25 months to get a full resolution of the story Tom King is saying. That's a little over 2 years, and that's completely insane for any comic book run. I get that they can be a little more confident about Batman, because of course Batman's going to run for 50 more issues. There's no question about that. But it's what you're asking of your reader, Tom King, and it's not fair. It's not okay. Nothing about this is acceptable. It's profoundly disappointing. And to be honest, as much as I enjoyed aspects of this comic, that frustration was felt through the entire read, and the frustration was not intentional. It's not like part of the story where you're supposed to feel frustrated. To a degree, that's there, and it does that well, but I found myself frustrated beyond the reasons of this comic. I found myself bored with the take on this story because of the sheer amount of dark and gritty and sad Batman stories that we've had over the last several decades. Seeing a story that actually had something happy and have something move forward for Batman and a different, meaningful change for his character, that would have been meaningful. But instead, he's just going to be miserable again. Like when Jason Todd was killed, or when Tim Drake was killed, or when Damian Wayne was killed. And all of these characters came back. That's the thing, Batman has gone through a lot, but he's also had a lot of wonderful things happen to him. Who else has 3 sons or surrogate sons die, and all of them come back to life? Not many people are that lucky, Bruce Wayne. You should be so grateful. So, do I recommend this comic? It's a glorious work of art, but a book of pretty pictures does not make a good comic book. You need a good story to tell it, and as it stands, this is not a good story. It expects you to read 50 more issues for a full payoff of the event in here, and I don't think that's fair. And I don't think after I read the next 50 issues of Batman, I'm going to change my mind on this. After so much build-up and hype, this isn't a very good read. It's disappointing and frustrating. I don't think I'd recommend it to anyone, but you kind of should maybe check it out for yourself and see whether or not you like it. I was told by people the last page of this comic really sets up future arcs of this story in very exciting ways. If you want to explain to me how that is, feel free to do so in the comments section below, because it looks like just another rogues gallery taking on Batman, and all excited because he's sad, and that's going to make their lives a little easier as villains. Okay, if you say so. I'm not convinced that's very good storytelling, guys. That's Saturday morning cartoon stuff. And while that's okay and would probably be welcome in the Batman series, that's not the tone we've been taking so far, and that's not the tone of this comic. Instead, I recommend this. If you were planning to or pre-ordered a Batman number 50 comic book at your local comic book store, please buy something else instead. It doesn't have to be from DC. In fact, maybe it shouldn't be from DC. But you should buy something else instead. You should support the local comic book store because they don't deserve to be punished. And in DC's defense, because this really is the worst thing they've done since the start of Rebirth, at the very least, they're paying the advertising costs of what all the local comic book stores spent in preparation for Batman number 50. They just announced that yesterday, and while they aren't covering the cost of the Batman number 50 issues themselves, which frankly they should do, they're at the very least doing this. Your outrage has already meant something, fan community of DC. And well done, because it was rightful outrage, and they're actually doing something good about this. They are at the very least trying to make it right, and they do deserve credit for that. Because in the old days of the New 52, they would have just gone into radio silence mode and not done a damn thing. The local comic book stores were the ones screwed over the most by this, so it's very, very good that they did something about it at the very least. DC can't fix everything about this. I don't know who's to blame for that New York Times article leaking. I suspect it was DC because the New York Times is a big publishing company. They don't usually make mistakes like forgetting to not spoil something days before the book has been released. So at the very least, DC is trying to make it right. They are not beyond forgiveness at this point. But wow, they and Tom King have a lot to answer for in this issue. So, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.